This is a Bike Sauce exclusive. But yeah, so those will be coming out this year, and one of the perks of the job is I get to weigh in on this stuff.
Everyone, just a quick update. You might have seen on my Instagram that I took a pretty bad spill last week. I fell pretty hard on a railroad track and fractured my scapula. So since I can't, well, shouldn't ride for the time being, I have a pretty special video for you this week that doesn't require me kitting up or wrenching on bikes. In this video, I got a chance to sit down and chat bikes with Fergus Tanaka from Ritchey, who's been supporting this channel essentially from day one. We talk about the company's origin, the design philosophy behind their bikes, and he reveals some pretty exciting things coming down the pipeline toward the end of the video. So I hope you'll sit back, grab a coffee, and enjoy. Fergus Tanaka, official title is U.S. Marketing Manager for Ritchey. How long have you been there, and what does your role entail?
I've been at Ritchey for 7 years. Initially, I was brought on by my predecessor, a fellow by the name of Sean Coffey. He really showed me the ropes for a lot of things. After he left, I moved into the marketing manager position. And contrary to a lot of people think, Ritchey really is a small company. So for 3 years, I was the marketing team. Now I have a counterpart who's in Europe. It says international, but he does Europe marketing as well. What does my job entail? A little bit of everything. So going to trade shows, being the face that people talk to, social media, determining campaigns, that kind of thing. Before I started at Ritchey, I had a friend that worked here, and I would literally call him on the phone and say, "I'm looking at a Ritchey ad. It sucks. I want to see some dude shred gnar and your logo." And he goes, "Oh, I don't think we can do that." So I came onto Ritchey, and that's what I did. Most of the things were just opportunities that I saw. So 2 Beers with Ritchey came as a response to the pandemic. We were all kind of stuck, and people wanted to hear more from their brands. And so I wanted to address people and let them know that, Ritchey isn't just some letters on the side of a product. It was people, and that we love bikes as much as they do. I don't know. I used to work in this bike shop, and not everyone there were real riders, and it always baffled me. And I thought, man, I just love riding my bike so much, like almost to a fault. And that's what I wanted to do, was share that feeling, because it's such a dumb thing, but I love it so much. I do what I can to make sure that I know what I'm talking about, especially product.
Yeah.
I've ridden all of our product. I've used it all. And I want to make sure that when I'm talking about it, I can tell you honestly what I feel. Like a perfect example is the VentureMax bar. We got a sample in. I was just looked at it like, what the heck? This is goofy as hell. And I put it on a bike just to, do my diligence. And I realized, oh, that's what this bar is for. Okay. And then when people ask about it, I could say with confidence, oh, this bar is great for this purpose. It'll feel good on this bike. Oh, you want these elements? Boom, this is it. And, again, the fact that, like, I I've been I haven't been without a bike since I was 8 years old. Always I've had a bike. And if it wasn't within arm's reach, it was in the next room. And I I try to definitely bring that almost obsession to the work that I do, because I want to love what I do, and I'm lucky enough to do it, and especially at a company that I grew up with. So
This is I don't know how else to write this question. It's a super loaded question, but for someone who doesn't know exactly what Ritchey is, like you mentioned earlier, Ritchey's not just a name on a product. How did this company begin, and how old is it, and when did it start? Who's Tom Ritchey? What's the brief history of Ritchey, as it were?
yeah, hold on, let me I think I have a prop. So yeah, here we go. Is this showing up big enough for you? This is Tom Ritchey.
There's Tom, yeah.
With his P team frame. No, I'm glad that you asked about Ritchey. So this is actually the 50th anniversary. So 2022 will mark 50 years of Tom designing and building bikes, bicycle components, and the start of a path that he's been on for almost his whole life. Tom started building frames out of his parents' garage when he was a teenager in 72. His love of bikes came from his dad, and he started learning everything he could about bikes, from repairing tubulars to eventually, getting an old race frame. Famously, he got this broken Chinelli and re-welded it, fixed it, made it better, and raced on that for a number of years before he felt confident enough to build his own frames. Very quickly, it was recognized that he was good at it. He was good at brazing, he was good at designing frames, and something like when he was 16, I think, he was already making, 100 to 150 frames a year. And he negotiated with his school to do independent study, and that was him starting a business. Over the years, he's been part of a number of movements that have just been very successful, most famously mountain bikes. He'll tell you he didn't invent the mountain bike, but he was the first production mountain bike maker. It started with his relationship with Charlie Kelly and Gary Fisher, them selling frames that Tom produced. And those were called mountain bikes by Tom. And he really dialed in the design of the mountain bike, pretty much the first mountain bikes that we saw through the early 80s, early to mid 80s. And there's this story about a famous bike brand purchasing a couple of Tom's frames and then taking them to a manufacturing house. I think it started in Japan, and saying, make these frames for us. And then that started their mountain bike line. From there, Tom just kept innovating, and he started developing components that are specific to mountain bike, because previous to that, there just weren't any. You had, components that you're kind of piecing together from other industries like motorcycle levers or different brakes, or wheels was the first thing that he designed specifically for mountain to withstand these forces. And from there, it just grew.
You mentioned earlier that, contrary to what people believe, it's not a huge company. How big is Ritchey at this point?
I think globally there are 50 people.
50.
So Ritchey North America has 6 people. That consists of sales, warranty, there's a GM, there's accounting, myself, design. Europe has 8, which is all of those roles, plus an HR and another salesperson, and CEO is in Europe. And then Asia, where we have offices, is mostly manufacturing, and they have about 20 to 30 people.
50, that's, I don't know,
very small.
It's like an order of magnitude less than I was expecting.
I talk to friends at other companies, and they'll say, oh, my marketing team is small. And I said, hold on, your marketing team, which is part of a bigger group of marketers, is small. I am the marketing team. It's me and one other person. We definitely punch above our belt when it comes to what we're capable of. And it forces us to be scrappy, but also honest. We have to be honest,
Yeah.
And I hope it shows in, not that it's a fly by night, but it shows in the fact that we care, and for me, that's probably the most important.
When I think of other companies, certain bike companies, if I think of that company, I have sort of like an image of who rides that bike. I just don't have that with Ritchey. Like, it's such a broad range of cyclists who appreciate Ritchey frames. I don't know if you can answer this question, but like, who would you say like Ritchey is for? And similarly, what would you say is like the company's ethos, if there is one?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. You're right. Ritchey's not about the latest thing, right? It's about what works. And if it doesn't make sense to Tom, it's not going to happen. The one thing that I can think of that sticks out is a tapered head tube. Everyone thinks they need a tapered head tube and their bike's not going to be stiff enough or whatever. Unless you're racing crits, unless you're racing track where you need your bike to be as stiff and responsive as humanly possible, you don't need it. We've stuck to a straight steerer tube because what we know is a lot of that noise and just kind of harshness that you feel in that front end is dissipated with something as simple as a straight steer tube. So it's very thoughtful design that goes into everything that's Ritchey. It's not just, oh, we're going to kick it old school and do the straight steer tube. It's more that, no, this works. I was at a product release once and we were given these bikes to ride, and cool bikes. On paper, they look cool, carbon adventure bike, press fit bottom bracket, and tapered head tube. When we're on the road, it felt awesome. But we'd do these trails and I'd come off the trails just like, man, my hands just hurt. And I realized like, oh, I don't feel that when I ride my Outback. And I'm not, trying to soapbox sell you something. It's just we're realizing that we're trying to reverse engineer things. So, there's all this stiffness in the frame, but we're trying to build, a seat post that has a shock absorber in it, or a stem that, flexes when you ride it, or even build it into a headset somewhere. And you're adding more moving parts where you don't need to. Maybe if you just didn't have that specific design, you wouldn't need all this crazy innovations, as it were.
Right.
And the proof's in the pudding. And the thing that I tell people is the thing about Ritchey that makes it great is what you don't notice. You can go and do a century and come home and it's not like, oh, my wrists are sore, this is sore because of one thing or another. You realize like, oh, all that noise I would have felt on my crit bike or world tour approved race bike, it's not there. Again, it goes back to Tom's design philosophy and what has been proven to work over his 50 years of experience. To answer your question, who's Ritchey for? We're for everyone, is probably the easiest answer. Ritchey's not someone's first bike. It's maybe their second or third. But what we're noticing is the demographics of Ritchey are becoming more diverse. So, a younger audience is now discovering Ritchey, which is great. People that grew up with Ritchey in the 80s and 90s are aging out, for lack of a better term, but people that are just getting into bikes in the last few years are realizing, oh, wait, these bikes ride awesome, and they want to go and have fun on them. That's great. I was looking at the metrics the other day through analytics and realized that the amount of women that know about Ritchey and are visiting the site has quadrupled in my time here. I'm not saying that I did that, but I'm saying that, cool, more people of different types are discovering the brand. And that feels really good. It's not just a specific set.
I don't know if that was a great question, but I mean, a lot of what you
fantastic.
Said, most of what you said is, none of that surprises me, just based on my experience with Ritchey so far. But I wouldn't say I'm aging out yet.
I don't think I am either. So, but
yeah,
previously our target audience was, dudes in their 50s. That's who really resonated with Ritchey because they remember when, Don Myra won world championships or when Frischi was racing World Cups, but kids are not kids, but people that are, let's say, under 30, they don't know who they are. But these were people that set the stakes for the tent that is now mountain biking. For a while, I'd go to shows, like trade shows, and people would say, oh, what's Ritchey? And I'd be kind of a jerk to them and I'd say, well, you know what a mountain bike is, right? Oh, yeah. Okay. This guy made mountain bikes accessible for everyone, and inevitably I would see him again the next year and they go, oh yeah, Ritchey. Like they get it,
At this point, I've ridden the Outback for an extended period of time. I've ridden the Ascent, the new Ascent, for an extended period of time. I would say this to anybody, not just I'm talking to you, but like the Outback and the Ascent are two of the funnest, and I know that's not a word, but two of the funnest bikes that I've ever ridden. I don't know why. I don't know why they're the funnest bikes. It's not the whole story, but certainly, well, maybe two elements that stand out the most: the material and the geometry. I would say it kind of boils down to. Geometry I can wrap my head around. Can we talk a little bit about the material? Ritchey steel is like I don't know, when you say Ritchey steel, people know what you're talking about, and it has this sort of magical quality to it. Why? Like why Ritchey steel over carbon or even another steel manufacturer?
Yeah, I think that's another great one. It does boil down to the way that the bike's created, and things that we know that work. And of course, geometry is a big one, but you hit the nail on the head with the steel. It's part of what Tom refers to as the secret sauce. And it's that, the budding profile is very unique on the bike. So the budding on a top tube at the head tube isn't the same as the top tube at the seat tube. And it's also specific to the manufacturing process. Something like a lug bike would need a longer budding profile to accommodate the lug where it sits, because you're heating it up there. You want it to be a little thicker. With TIG, you can get away with a really short budding profile. So what that means is you get a lot more of the kind of like that thin part of the tubing. So you get a little bit more relief as far as weight goes, but it gives it a kind of liveliness, as it were.
Just to be clear, like for people who don't know, like the budding profile means steel tube. It's like a hollow tube all the way through, and the wall thicknesses are not constant all the way across. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but the budding profile has to do with where the wall thickness changes along the tube.
Correct. Okay. And so, to kind of touch on like steel versus steel, some companies will use what's called straight gauge tubing, meaning that the thickness of the tube is the same from beginning to end. And it, it'll ride okay, but it'll be heavy and it may just feel a little not as lively, when you change that budding profile. So we use what's referred to as a triple butted, meaning that there's multiple thicknesses of tubing going on within a particular section of tube. So, the down tube at the bottom bracket would be one thickness versus the down tube at the head tube. You start dabbling in tubing diameter, like outer diameter. There's a limit to how big you can make the tube while also trying to keep it light and strong. So again, if we start talking about tapered head tubes, well, now your down tube needs to be bigger to meet up with that tapered head tube. And so what does that do to that? Do you have a section at your water bottle boss that's basically beer can thick? Like, okay, as soon as you run into a pothole, that thing's toasted. So we're very intentional with how we use the tubing. And again, it goes back to Tom's history. When he started building frames, there's only so many places you could go to get tubing, and it was very limited. He saw an opportunity to create a tube set specific to a frame that didn't need lugs, a frame that could be constructed quickly with TIG. And he went to Tonge in Japan, and he was the first person of his generation to do this and say, create this tube set with these thicknesses in these areas for my frames. And that kind of became the model for steel bikes of that era.
Ritchey steel, yeah. That's a term I've heard even before I really understood sort of the value proposition of a well-built steel frame. I've heard that term forever, Ritchey steel. And every time you say it, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Ritchey steel, it's amazing."
Sure. Yeah.
And now after riding two of the latest bikes, I totally get it. I get it, but it's really hard to articulate. So, can you tell us anything about like upcoming bikes or things in the pipeline that we could get excited about?
Yes, to a degree. There's a new frame that Tom's working on that is basically like a closed door idea. He wanted to create a bike that was kind of, I don't know if it's a jack of all trades, but it was exactly what he wanted. The frame lineup, we'll come to him and we'll say, hey man, like we see a need in the market for this type of bike, something like the Outback, for example. And he'll say, okay, and he'll come up with a design and then we execute on it. And so it's a little bit of us kind of informing him as well as him saying yes or no to that particular idea. This one was Tom saying, okay, I want to make this bike. Its release date, I don't know just yet, but that's in the pipe. Don't ask about it. It's probably like at least another year and a half out to 2 years. Then we're going to reintroduce another fan favorite frame, probably early 23. But this next one I'm actually looking forward to. I think a lot of people have been asking about it, so I'm happy to bring it back. I think we're going to try to improve upon the Outback a little bit more. Actually, we'll be releasing anniversary colorways for key bikes in our lineup. We'll make an official announcement later this month, actually. So
Take note of that.
this is a Bike Sauce exclusive. But yeah, so those will be coming out this year. And one of the perks of the job is I get to weigh in on this stuff and say like, oh, that colorway is sick, or some of the things with the branding I get to weigh in on. So that's just really fun for me. I really love that behind the scenes kind of stuff.
Any cool stories about Tom or your experience at Ritchey so far?
1 year after Eurobike, I was going to do a little bike tour from Eurobike is held in Friedrichshafen, or was held in Friedrichshafen, Germany, and our corporate office in Europe is in Switzerland near the Italian border. So I was going to do this little 3-day bike tour. They would take me up and over the Gavia and Stelvio, like these Alp passes that you see on the tour, or these really iconic climbs. And I was borrowing a bike from the office out there, and it had mid-compact gearing up front, but it had a 1125 in the back. And I thought, I'm going to need more gears. And so I mentioned this, before I left. I said, was there a bike shop around? I want to swap out the cassette. And Tom goes, well, what's on there? I said, that's 1125. I kind of, it'd be nice to have a 28 or 32. He goes, what? He goes, how old are you? It's like, I still ride 1125 and you can't get up with that? It's like, man, this fool just shamed me, like what do you say to Tom after that? Like, you don't know, old man. Like, no, because he literally is riding standard gearing, with the 25 in the back. And it's like, oh, okay.
You either rode it with the 1125 or you like shamefully secretly put on a bigger cassette later that night.
Oh, I scurried away and put on a different cassette. It was, just head down, like, Tom, put me down like that. Yeah.
A lot to think about. Really appreciate your time. This was amazing.
Yeah, of course.
Hope the viewers enjoyed this. Got a little inside scoop at Ritchey. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, happy to do it. I don't know next time you're up this